Welcome to
What a block!
Triple Blockheads,
Back set, block down.
the podcast for all things volleyball.
Blockhead!
Aloha and welcome to another episode of Triple Blockheads. Here with my fellows, Marc, Frank. We're going to be talking about numbers today, fellas. As the resident analytics and in the business data guy, I'm really excited about them and getting your thoughts on how we can bring numbers into the volleyball world here. A lot of athletes are really looking at stats to kind of differentiate themselves from either their peers, their teams, or how to get better. Let's really focus on it, how we can use stats to see where I should be developing and continuing improving our game. So let's start as we are really developing at those younger ages. What are the things that you guys are looking at in the club space, Frank, around stats?
Yeah, I think stats are tricky because we are balancing in the club space this idea of growing and letting kids make errors and letting them be cool with that, and maybe not letting stats at an early age be a indicator of progress versus not, especially if we're trying something for the first time or they're learning an arm swing for the first time. Do we want to throw stats into that right away and let that be something that defines their success? Or is there something that is more tangible or something that they can feel that is maybe a measure of something that is showing them progress? But I think some stats, I want to maybe break it down from someone that's in middle school and then someone that's in high school. I think someone that's in middle school, learning the game, learning how to play at a faster pace, learning all sorts of things about the game of volleyball. I think some stats that are probably measurable that are important are stats related to athleticism. So are you working on jumping higher? Are you working on being faster? Are you working at being a little more quick twitch or whatever those athletic measurements could be as they're looking to become a more explosive volleyball player if they're a jumper and a hitter, or a faster side-to-side player if they're a digger, or play a lot of back row. I think those are something that might make more sense right away for someone in middle school looking to improve their athleticism while incorporating more feelings in the arm swing or feelings in your technical setting or whatever it may be. I think high school kids, stats can become more measurable in the club space, but I'm personally just a little bit more hesitant about throwing a lot of that in because I still want them taking chances and trying new things, and I don't know if stats take away or make that a hesitant thing for them. But I think for a high school kid, if you're a setter, maybe you are starting to look more at assists per set. So how many times you're getting an assist to a hitter and how many times that's happening per set, and how many opportunities did you have to set the ball and how many assists are you getting on those. I think if you wanted to really dive deep is how many times do you get to set the ball and how many quality approaches do you get on those sets. I think that's really hard to measure. I don't know if a lot of apps have that as a statistical measuring of the club space, but I think that's a way to dive deeper into what actually matters for a club kid. Is sometimes you have 20 kills in a match and you can see that in your club match for a high school kid, but who are you playing against? What did those kills look like? Were they kills that would score against a really good team? I think those are things that the high school club kid has to keep in mind, is the quality of competition, and are you still that athletic thing that you did on the ball, is that stat measurable against for long-term success? So I'm in general more hesitant about individual stats in the club space because I think it could take away from some of the things that we're trying to capture with club kids and giving them more freedom to make errors.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it's probably contrary to a lot of people who are listening right now, right? Is, hey, stats it's a measurement, and you can determine better and improvement based on those measurements. I think it's a tool to use in the right way, and I think sometimes it's focused on the negative, right? Well, like, hey, I missed this many serves. I had this many hitting errors. Or, I only had X amount of assists per set. Or only had the word only. I hear that a lot in younger kids. So and I think that's well taken.
My personal club team, they're going to think I sound crazy right now because all we're diving into for the most part is stats and video. So my personal club team is probably like, you don't believe that at all, Coach Frank. But I think the higher level you have of kids, then you're starting to coach more college volleyball. Like I have a really good 17s team right now, or 18s team is really talented. I think then it makes more sense to start looking at side out percentage and specific rotations. Here's what our hitting percentage is out of system. Because now we're starting to play quality competition where those stats are probably more agreeable across the whole season,
I'd say my approach, especially with younger kids from a stat perspective, is less about tracking the stats and letting them reflect on what happens and more about knowing what a goal should be for you as a coach to then make that the goal of the drill. You know what I mean? So if we're in a serve-receive drill, I want to pass, at our level, we want to pass 60% perfect passes. So that's 6 out of 10. So I'm going to say we're going to pass 10 balls, and we want to get 6 that are perfect, right? Doesn't put any extra pressure on the kid aside from did we meet the goal or not, but does kind of educate them about the statistical process and like what we should be striving for without bogging them down, right? They still get to execute the skill. They still are going, but we just have in the back of our mind that we're trying to get 60% perfect pass. You don't even really have to talk about it as long as you're setting up the drills with that, with a attainable and accurate, good goal in mind. Those are based through some statistical analysis on our part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's well said because when you're still learning the game when you're younger, especially. I mean, just the idiosyncrasies of how you, as a team, you contribute to a team success, and I think understanding by position or by team from a statistical perspective what is good. If you went and asked, 10 kids from 10 states that are all 15U, someone's going to be, they're all outside hitters. One's going to be like, 200. One's probably going to be like, 50-50, 500. I need to hit 500. I'm like, what? Not so much. Yeah. So I think setting the standard, and that's part of coach's job, right? I also think that kind of like baseball, it's a baseball analogy too. You're successful, if you're 3 out of 10 success, it's a really good year. If you hit 300, oh yeah. So I think connecting in different ways, I think is important.
And I think how does that fit the playing style of your team? Mm-hmm. Like hitting, if you have an outside pairing on your team that their roles are more to keep you in system than they are to get a bunch of kills because maybe you're more middle right side heavy. Mm-hmm. That's the playing style of your group that you've identified that you want to play like you're going to want to be more low air as an outside pairing mm-hmm. on that team. But if it was flipped and your outsides are your two top dogs and they're going to get a bunch of swings and you're giving them green lights, then their hitting percentage should look different compared to a team where you need those outsides to keep you more in system. And in club, like those teams, every team has their own playing style because you kind of have what you have. You don't get to recruit a national base of kids where you can find kids to fit your playing style. I think a great club team is a coach that has figured their playing style out based on the type of kids they have, and I think that's also going to dictate what stats actually matter in the club realm.
Definitely,
if that's something you're thinking about.
Definitely where you want to focus that stat attention, and I like your analogy of the smaller outsides or less, volume to the outsides. Like air percentage becomes really important. Mm-hmm. Easy to calculate, easy to track. And then conversely, those pins that are taking 50, 60 swings a match, then it becomes kill percentage. Right. How frequently am I killing the ball versus all of these sets that I'm getting? And then we want to look at, from that, what are we doing to set ourselves up for success for these 50 swings?
Yep.
Like, am I erring in these balls at 10 feet that I'm not going to get a kill in anyway? Can I eliminate those errors to affect my efficiency? But overall, I think by the time they're in high school and thinking about college, they should have a general understanding of what goes into your hitting efficiency. If that's an area that you're really focused on and you want to hit 250 as an outside, great number, good goal, what goes into that piece and what can I move up, move down, right? Do I need to be more conservative in out-of-system situations or bad ball situations to lower my error percentage, and that will make my efficiency go up? Or do I need to go after it a little bit more and get more kills, and that will help my efficiency get there? I think it differs for the type of player and style that you are, even though you're in the same position, and we all want 3 kills a set and to hit 250. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and that's where I think as an individual athlete, 14U and younger, it becomes really tricky to make stats the main focus of a kid's progression. Because if you are already telling your outsides at 14U to be more low error, I think you're changing their playing style in the long term. That's not actually going to be.
They're playing it safe.
They're playing it safe way too early.
Yeah.
Like let them iron that part out of their game when they get into later in high school or in college, if they are on a team that they need them to be more first contact based.
Completely agree. And I would say, like, with young kids, we're changing the idea of statistics altogether, right? You can change the goal to be whatever process you're trying to get out of that move. So if we're in a digging drill, we need to get X balls in this amount of time up to the middle of the court. That's more important than I'm digging 80% in system or whatever that may be. You know what I mean? So just framing it in a way that gets the goal that we want and helps teach them about goals, standards, these type of axioms that we're trying to hit without implicitly putting it in their face and being like, you need to get 6 out of 10 or whatever it is.
I think changing the mindset of from, hey, this is my individual target that I need to hit for success, to, hey, you know, this is how I'm measuring and how I'm getting to a point where I'm improving, and all it is a measuring stick, and it continue to progress in that point. But as I would say, the one area I think that you can see in stats at a younger age, maybe more high school, in the setting space, just set distribution. I think you can use statistics just to help understand your IQ from a development perspective and an IQ. It may not necessarily be around just the success of those hitters. I mean, you can get to that point, but sometimes you just need to see, I'm caught up in the game, caught up in playing. I need to take a step back, watching video, seeing the stats, and seeing how the whole thing comes together, right? Am I 90% outside, or am I, and of those 90%, are those people hitting this? Do I need to maybe think about something different? It's not necessarily your execution, could be, but it just maybe decision making.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you brought up a good point there, and it was the taking a step back, right? Most statistics are more useful in the aggregate than on a match-by-match basis. You know what I mean?
Totally
If
agree.
a player hits 100 or lower on the outside, we're not going to completely revamp how we're training her because she had a match that was bad or below what the standard is. You know what I mean? But if we go over a month and we have 10 matches in that month and we're seeing a trend right now that we can say we have enough attempts to qualify this as accurate data, now we can glean where we need to focus on the training a little bit more. So I definitely don't want anybody to get bogged down on the day-to-day of statistics. Rather take it a week at a time or a month at a time, or if you break your season down into phases, like what does phase 1 stats look like? Okay, that should dictate how we're going to adjust training into phase 2, into phase 3, however you break down your season.
See, the corporate analytic eye in me is like really like geeking out right now because of the fact that if you plot everything out on a scatter plot, you're gonna have outliers both ways. Find the mean, find that median, find where that range is, and then say this is where I normally get to.
That line of best fit.
Thank you.
Did that do something
It
for
did,
you right
no,
there?
I-
You like that?
Oh yeah, that was
nice.
good. I like it. No, well done. So let's move on from the development, and as we get into, Marc, more that high level prospect and also into the collegiate realm. Obviously, stats become much more complex for coaches, especially. And I think it's an important distinction between what coaches are looking at to set their team up for success, and versus, really in this conversation, individuals, like what are individuals looking at to see and drive success?
Yeah, so we approach this in two different phases, right? So we keep traditional statistics in practice, hitting percentage, kill percentage, air percentage, all of these things, passing rating, dig percentage, like we have all that data, and that's great. And we want our athletes to know what a good number for their position is. We call that the gold standard. And we just spent a lot of time right after season ended figuring out what this gold standard is going to be across all our positions. So we take basically statistical data from everybody that was all Big 12 or all region or all American in a specific position, and then take all that information and find your averages through that. What we found was the gold standard for an outside hitter, you want to be about 37% kill. You want to hit above 230. You want to be about 13% air. Like there are certain axioms or markers that if you hit this, we will probably win a good amount of matches.
Your probability of success is much higher.
Exactly. So and they don't need to understand necessarily how we got those numbers or where they came from as much as what goes into meeting them if you're a big stat-focused person. Some of our girls really love it. Some of them don't. I haven't seen one of them thrive while the other squanders just because they don't have the appreciation. But I think it's important to be able to come back to the film and use that as a marker to get you to that point where you want to be. Now, the other approach to this, aside from our traditional statistics, is what we like to do in practice, and those are more process-focused, right? Traditional statistics, as I've been discussing them, are result-focused, right? End of plays, terminal, I got a kill, I didn't get a kill, I got an error, I didn't make an error. These are process-focused statistics that we will keep track of, and we call them conditional statistics because we can flip what goes into it to get what we want. One example of this that we're doing right now that I really enjoy is how we're tracking serving in our practice space. So the things that we care about or have determined that we care about in serving are, is it clean, meaning does it float or not spin? We are looking for no spin. Is it in the window? So is it below the top of the antenna and the top of the net? Like, does it fly through that space? Is it hitting the mile per hour that you have developed and assigned? Each of our kids has a specific mile per hour that is most conducive to their serve that we've spent a year finding what that speed is for them. And then did you make it or not? Okay. And the make it or not is less important. That's just a good way to reference back. So we'll serve 10 balls, 20 balls, whatever throughout practice, and then have the girls go look and reflect. And basically we're trying to draw, or we can map out correlations between when I miss my window, I'm serving the ball out of bounds. Or if I don't have a good hand contact, I'm missing more of those balls into the net. So it'll just dictate how we're going to focus the training a little bit differently. And I think it's given some ownership to the girls over their space, right? The serve is a closed skill. It's all about them. But this just leads them to a little bit more specific, potentially more useful framework than just going back and, well, that one wasn't great, so I better just serve again. I was like, well, can we be a little bit more educated on how we're going to go about this serve training piece? Now, to convert just that in a board, we have managers that put it into an Excel, and then we can run the numbers, and I can find out, well, right now you're striking the ball 40% clean. That needs to be higher. I don't know what the gold standard for that is, but I know
it's not 40%.
It's higher than 40%. So I think that is important, and I think it also allowed us to frame what a tough serve means to our kids a little bit differently. So before, I think in their head we equated a tough serve is a ball that gets them out of system. Well, yes, but you can also serve tough serves that get dimed because we're at a high level,
right?
And that
Volleyball.
happens. Yeah, because it happens. So we're talking, when we are looking at that board in those four categories, we're saying exclude the in out, and then if you have two of the three, like if I serve clean and I hit my MPH but I don't hit my window and it goes in, that's probably a tough serve. Okay, if I don't hit it clean, but I hit it through the window and I hit it as fast as I'm trying to, that's probably a tough serve. So like it just allows for, I don't know, some forgiveness through this rather than is it tough, is it not, did they pass it well or not, and that's why I'm basing my results or how I feel about my serve.
You're focusing on things that you can control.
Exactly.
Like you can control, and especially in that serving, because again, prior episode, that it's it is the only thing you actually control from that start, right? So I love that concept because you're saying I succeeded in mine. Athletics has there's competition, and sometimes someone's did something well. That's okay. You don't have to say that you did something poorly because someone else did something well.
100%.
Consider all that officially stolen.
Go for it. Take it all.
I do want to know, how do you guys measure if it's in the window?
Eye test. So we put elastic up generally.
Just antenna to antenna?
Yep, antenna, just for a visual guide when we're working on like serve training specifically. But if we're doing a serve and pass drill and we're going to track our serving, but the drill is really a pass-focused drill, we'll put that elastic down, and then it's just eye test. Did it physically go below the top of the antenna
So
or
the
not?
players can own that right away.
Yeah, that one's usually pretty clear.
Yeah.
So for the past couple weeks that we've been doing this, our pin group has been like, they just are kind of focused on their piece and go through their routine and then serve, and whoever's tracking just tracks. And then our middle group, for whatever reason, is like very into like telling whoever's tracking, I got all of them or I didn't, or that wasn't clean, but the other two were good, which is an interesting kind of dynamic between the two positions. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
But it's just a personality thing, basically. But as long as if they're not the one reflecting immediately on it, then they need to go to the board and see at some point. There has to be a reflection on what I did and how am I going to adjust or not moving forward.
The best part of it is the moving forward part, right? Like with intention.
Yes.
I love that. That's awesome. That's cool.
You also said something really awesome there relative to the gold standard and like that whole K performer methodology of like taking, these are all that people that are successful. If we want to be successful, let's look at other things that are successful. The other thing too is that the game continues to change. And as the game changes, different positions are being heavily more weighted. And the types of players and the types of roles that they play are also different. So if it might be in 2022, the right sides are hitting, 450. In 2028, it might be that they're hitting 300 again.
I love that your stats are so inflated from the men's game that you're just like, yeah, nobody hits 450.
Everyone
in the women's
gets kills
game,
or
but sure, yeah.
So I'm just like, well, no, I just state that I'm just like trying to create a big variance, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm just like throwing a round number out of like, hey, it was this then, now it's this now. We don't want to hold you to the same standard, right? Because it continues to change.
Yeah,
it continues to change. So let's move on to how we can use those individual stats and kind of integrate that into training. What are you looking at from a training? Obviously, serving was a good example there, but maybe in a team training environment.
We'll still stick conditional more than anything. Obviously, our passers, when we get lots of passing reps, want to know what their passer rating is, and that's an easy, transferable, comparable across other people, other positions. Harder to do outside of your team comparatively because you have different people deciding what those ratings are. So it's a little subjective. We are fortunate enough to have a technical coordinator that always is statting, so it's always his discretion. So it ends up being pretty consistent. If you use just volley metrics, that would probably allow you to compare more accurately across teams because it's AI. It does it the same for everybody. Like those numbers, you can assume, while they may not be the exact number that you got when you did it, you can assume that it'll be accurate across other paces. So I think that's important. But we're going to keep in that conditional stat phase as much as we can for other positions. So just to keep us focused and intentional in what we're doing. So from a passing perspective, while they care about their passer rating, we're also going to track body position. You know what I mean? Did you maintain an athletic position through that entire move? Okay. That, I think, is an important factor to being a successful passer. Now, have I tracked their passer rating compared to their percent of time that they're in an accurate body position? No, to that extent. But I bet if I did, there would be a strong correlation between the two. So there's some of that piece where we're trying to, the action we're trying to get rather than the result we're trying to get, right? Can we keep in that process? We stay in there in the training space so that, to Frank's point earlier, they're not getting bogged down with numbers. It's not a number crunching type of figuring out, well, I passed 10 balls and I had four passes and 1 pass, like trying to figure it out in their head. It's, hey, did you keep an athletic body position that whole time, or did you rise up? Did you feel your hips slide through? Like, what'd you feel through that? No, I felt like I was in a good body position. Perfect. Great job. And then that pass is probably a 2-3, but it takes a little bit onus off of the result of that pass more into the process, and we end up getting the result we want. So we stay in that phase for as much as we can. When you go into attacking, it becomes a little bit different. Yes, there's some mechanical things that we will try and focus on. Did I really open up the way I want to? We can track that kind of stuff, but kill percentage becomes the most important thing for our attackers. And you can look at it in practice after a competitive drill. That's an easy thing to look at. But like, of these sets I get, how frequently am I scoring a point? The other one is air percentage. We don't spend a ton of times talking about it with the girls, but as a staff, I'm paying attention to that. How frequently are we losing points when you touch the ball? That's, as a coach, that's an important thing to know. And then the other piece that I have kind of dove into recently is, what are you doing in crunch time? So when it's 20 plus,
last 5,
what kind of attacker are you? And if your efficiency goes up in those types of situations, I'm going to say you have a little bit of that clutch gene, and we will probably look to go to you a little bit more in game. But I think every coach can kind of reflect on a team they've had and been like, this kid was really clutch. This kid is not clutch. And you can do that with the eye test. Sometimes it's nice to get a little data to back it up also.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, because you want to arm your setter with as much information as possible to make sure that they're differentiating the ball where you want them to differentiate the ball.
Does it become more like baseball, where you have like the third outside is the most clutch player, and you save him for the last 5 points?
100%.
You're in. You're the closer.
Yeah.
So
I need the lefty.
There's a couple of really good stories about like one guy, for whatever reason, just went off against this one team. I think it was Lewis, like a few years ago, had a kid that like every time they played Penn State would just go off and didn't play the rest of the year, never really played, not in the rotation, but every time they played that team, he started because something about it just every year just would torch him. And I was like, that is wild. Where is the statistical data that backs that up? Like, there probably isn't any aside from his amazing one match that he had that year where he torched that team.
And he played them 12 times because he redshirted 2 of the year.
Yeah, but like that piece of it is wild. So there's always those outliers. There's always the anomalies, the statistical anomalies. But yeah, as much as we can feed them and know what we're looking, they know what their standard's going to be and the steps it takes to get there, that we should have both of those covered between the practice conditional phase and the, I guess, more traditional statistical analysis afterwards.
I think you've talked a lot about this, and both of you did, around just more using stats in the way you want the athlete to see their success or measure their own success. And I think it's really important because you get the stat sheet or the box score or the standard stats that people think about, net hitting percentage, right? It takes so many things into consideration. And I think finding the thing that works for you, especially as a young athlete or even older athlete, is important. You mentioned there might be, maybe parents that are out there don't really understand what is my terminal versus my error or what is net? What is the differences between those things? You want to quickly just make sure we're leveling set with some of those parents?
Yeah, definitely. The basic ones for attacking, right? Kill percentage, air percentage. That is the number of kills over your total attempts will give you a percentage. That's your kill percentage.
And just to be clear, that's not what's on the box score.
That is not displayed on the box score, but can be You can calculate it
Yes.
from a box score that you look at. Same thing with air percentage, right? Airs over total attempts, air percentage. Both of those factor into your hitting efficiency. So I like to look at both of them individually a little bit more than I do hitting efficiency as a whole, because I think if you break it down, they tell a little bit more of this, a more specific story. And I'll break down that air percentage even further. We like to break it down into block percentage and actual hitting air percentage. So like if I'm 14% air, let's say, which is not a bad number for a pin, and I'm 10% air, 4% block, that's probably worth a conversation now with a kid to figure out how we're adjusting. Can we keep more balls in play and maybe get blocked a little bit more, but gives the defense a chance to touch more stuff or for you to score.
Unforced error rate.
Unforced errors are hard, right? Hard to overcome. They affect the bottom line across the board on every phase. So how can we educate them through the decision-making process once they get there?
I think that concept can really can translate to the club space a little bit more too, because then you can even look at all three of those things, or even add a couple of more specific things in there, whether it be from a defensive perspective is up percent, right, versus down percent. But I think that translates, because then you can continue the motivation from a progression and development without having a negative connotation on, hey, my overall hitting percentage was 0, but guess what? You had a really good terminal rate, or you were really low air. That's what we're looking for. Well done.
I totally agree that dissecting the errors more, even on the club side, dissecting your errors, how many aces you gave up, the hitting errors. Some of those errors are probably so close to being in the positive category.
Yeah.
So the challenging the block more, like you might make some errors initially, but those are going to be kills pretty soon. The getting ace, like you're just like one step away from not getting ace. You're just one earlier angle from that ball not being aced. And I think on the club side, like when you look at team stats, I think keeping limited team stats at younger ages are really important, but I think the stats that really tell a larger story is in serve receive, how many aces did you give up? Because that's going to tell a lot about what's going on in between plays, what the communication is probably like before the serve's happening. And if you're giving up aces, I mean, that's an issue you're going to have to solve at any age group, and that's a really, really important part of younger teams is getting the chance to get more swings. If you're giving up aces, that's not going to happen. And then I think you talked about earlier, like setter distribution, but it'd be interesting to see middle school teams look at the connections with their middles, because I think the more you can get your middles at younger age groups to be options longer and work that idea of just always trying to be an option, I think is really, really important going into high school, so you're not having to learn all that when you're in high school. And then as the kids get older, I think looking at, kind of talked about earlier, your team assists per set. So not just your setter's assist, but your team assist. I think that says a lot about your team's ability to create swings out of system. And then it's probably not statable on like a program or something that your assistant can probably do. But if you go back and watch your film for high-level club teams, what is the quality of your hitter's approach when you're out of system? So I think that says a lot about your girls' ability to just adapt on the fly and just create the chance to create a swing. And then from there we get more attempts, and then we can start dissecting the errors a bit more. So I think two those are pretty important stats based on the middle school or high school like age, but tell a bigger story about what's going on.
That spurred a thought for me, and if you're a parent that is a numbers person and likes to track things, I think a interesting team stat to look at rather than an individual stat is points earned versus your errors versus total points. So I think that's an easy way to, like, you can easily track it. Did we get a kill, ace, block, or not? and how did we get that point? So earned points versus given points. You can assume on average most teams are 8 to 9 airs a set. That's like a pretty standard thing. If they're higher than that, great, you're probably going to win that set. If they're lower than that, you better have earned some points. So just having an idea of what you're creating for your team versus just looking at the score at the end of it is easy to track and easy to have a conversation about afterwards.
The great segue is men's volleyball, right? Like men's volleyball coaches have become almost like crazy okay about missed serves, because if you don't serve aggressive, you're not gonna be able to play defense against those arms.
Yeah.
And the girls' game is at the high level is turning into that. More bics, more D balls, with how lethal the slide is. I mean, you could probably talk all day about it, but if you don't serve aggressive, like, you're going to get beat a bunch. But a normal fan looking at the box score, they lose by 2 points each set, and they see that there are 6 missed serves each set. The most common thing they're going to say is, oh, we just didn't miss those serves. We would probably win that set. It's debatable. You might even lose by more, you know?
Yeah, that's a hard one. If you want to be aggressive, you have to be okay with errors.
Right.
And that's, I think, the hardest thing for the fans to understand. There's definitely been points throughout this past year where it's the third or fourth miss in a set, or maybe a couple back to back, and you hear that like groan from the crowd, and like, you're making it a bigger deal than it is. Like, we've all moved past it. You guys need to too, because like for us to be successful, like our serve goal is 90%. Okay, that accounts for a lot of errors in that space over
multiples set,
you know what I mean? So it's not as dire as I think the general fans would think it is.
And I think that's why it's really important that, I mean, it's just in the stats conversation that one of the pitfalls of stats is looking at them unilaterally. If you pull one stat and you try to make a diagnostic of what's happening in your team or that individual or a tournament, that's not going to be indicative of what is. It might be a factor. It could be a key factor, but it's not going to tell the whole story. So
there's a chain of events for each stat.
Agreed. Completely agree. I kind of want to end. I know the evolution of stats in volleyball has really kind of jumped over the last 10 years. I mean, in club even, Frank, you guys, there's not even a real need to do them manually unless you want them in set, right, or in match, which, again, most good club teams are doing that so they can adjust from a coaching perspective, strategy perspective, right? But talk about just kind of the evolution there and what's out there.
The tech is so cool compared to when I was playing. There's all sorts of services. We use Ball Time AI. Not sponsored by the podcast, but there's a lot of stuff that will code your film for you. It's not all perfect yet, but from where we were 5 years ago, it's really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the amount of numbers that it can spit out are like, they're pretty impressive next level stuff, rather than even a coach with an iPad on a bench doing volley stat or anything like that. Like, it's way more detailed than that. So,
but it's great being able to go in there and see all of my girls' attacks, seeing their attacks just on bad passes, seeing their attacks when we're in system. So that's been really helpful for our team. Is talked about quality of approaches, like them being able to see their quality of approach when we're out of system compared to when we're in system. How do we make that, the same in all situations? So the tech is so cool. It's way different than I was playing. I was carrying around my tripod so I can get some film of all my games. In between sets, I'd leave the bench and go grab my tripod and make sure it was in the back line. And then I'd have to, go through it and edit. Now it's all just done for the players. So it's really cool. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that also leads it to those stats, from a recruiting perspective. I just want to talk a little bit about from a parents and just as you have a prospective athlete that's talking to collegiate coaches or collegiate programs, Marc, what do you guys look at from stats, in club or high school, and that determination as you are moving them into the process?
Yeah, I will say the stats that are presented in recruiting emails factor in about 1% of my decision-making process. There's too many variables that go into it, and ultimately I'm going to trust my eye over what I what I read in an email, potentially. I don't have a ton of like back and forth on that. And there are probably coaches that pay more attention to that stuff. I definitely think clubs should keep stats for all the reasons that we mentioned, but sharing them with college coaches is like, if you want to, cool, but it's not a real deciding factor. It doesn't really move the needle for me.
It shouldn't be a why.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a why whether you're manually tracking stats in your seat, or trying to gather as much stats so you can provide a package to a collegiate recruiter. Like, that shouldn't be your why.
Yeah. If it takes longer than you just having the stats already and typing them in an email, it's probably not worth it. Like, your time is probably better served doing something else.
Yeah.
Clubs don't care also what your stats are in high school. If you're sending me your high school stats because you think it's going to be impressive, I already know the conference you play in, and I know they're counting blocks as block touches, and those are not blocks. Passing a free ball is
not a dig.
Passing a free ball is not a dig. An ace doesn't count if they touched it twice.
So spot on. Yeah. I mean, that in lies the best example of why, you have to take stats with a grain of salt. You really do.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great conversation. And I think a couple of things I just want to highlight, because know what you're looking at and know why you're looking at it, and understand what's good. And try as much as you can to utilize those numbers in a positive spin, right? And look at those through how I'm going to continue to develop. I know stats come up in a lot of our episodes just because we're talking about whether it be skill levels or different type of strategies, and it is a way to continue measurement. So they're going to be here, they're going to stay, they continue to get more from an evolution perspective with AI and others. So I'm sure we maybe even bring this back later as we see other things come up in the industry. But thanks for tuning in to another episode of Triple Blockheads. Thanks, keep watching. Germany, England, all y'all out there, keep watching. And hit us up on our socials. Blockheads.
Blockheads.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Triple Blockheads. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode.